All right, hello, welcome everyone to DC on RMD, the Superman and Lois edition, the final installment of the Superman and Lois edition. I'm not quite sure how I feel about that. I'm sure we will probably end this discussion with large amounts of tears, but we will try to get through this as manly as possible.
They're tears of joy, Mike. Tears of joy.
That's right, because the meaning of life is joy. What a great way to end a Superman series. But we're going to get into all of that. Now, of course, we have Steve here. Hello, Steve.
Yo.
And you heard David. Okay, so we're going to be breaking down the last two episodes. And let me say we're going to be very casual when I say breaking down the last two episodes. It's going to be mostly just us talking about those last little bits of story that really just pushed the series finale over the edge, as well as season 4 as a whole. The episode titles, episode 9, To Live and Die Again, and episode 10, It Went By So Fast. And obviously that's dual meaning because the series went by so fast. Yeah. Also just the way they constructed this grand narrative. They ended the series in the same way they started the series. And that's one thing, just to get things started, that I really appreciated about this series. The fact that in all actuality, we really were privy to the midlife of Clark Kent and Lois. The midlife.
Yes.
But throughout the series, they managed to give us the cliff notes of things that overall made the series feel way more than just 4 seasons. It felt complete. You had the opening, the very first episode, the series premiere. In a lot of ways, it was a prologue, right?
Yeah.
It got things going. It told us what we have missed. It caught us up. And then the way the series ended did pretty much the same thing as a bit of an epilogue. All right, David, let's start with you. Give me your thoughts on the overall 2 episodes.
My God.
Just and I'll time you. We'll keep it about 2 minutes.
I'll keep it as simple as possible as I can. We have the perfect embodiment, the perfect visual representation of Doomsday. We have the perfect representation of Steel in the end when you get to see his costume. You get the perfect representation of several Superboys in the end. And honestly, you have the perfect representation of Superman's iconic villain in Lex Luthor. And then to top it off, you have the perfect representation of Superman and Lois. Better than anything I've ever seen. Is that sure enough?
Yeah. Steve?
I can't argue any point there. I agree wholeheartedly. From a visual perspective, we've seen a lot of incarnations over the years, and even the early introduction of this version of Doomsday, I think we all might
I thought I'd
have
never
felt,
see it, Steve.
Yeah, we felt, okay, this is a Doomsday. Maybe not what I would expect or want, but it's a Doomsday, and maybe arguably better than Batman v Superman in a lot of ways, visually. But then by the time you get to the Doomsday and you're going, holy shit, that's Doomsday. Like, they did it, and they pulled it off. And I was really worried there in the 9th episode. I mean, we've talked about this over the last 4 years, episode after episode. Like, how can they tie all these loose threads up by the end of the season? It just doesn't seem possible. And I'll be damned if they didn't pull it off. They tied it up with a beautiful little Christmas bow right there at the end. And no complaints.
Yeah. Well, I don't think a lot of us had anticipated they would end the series quite like this, even though we have been on a similar page with these writers throughout the last 4 years. Many of our theories this season were, I wouldn't say completely inaccurate. Actually, some of it happened. Quite a bit of what we were theorizing actually happened. It just was a variant version of what we were talking about. It wasn't a 1-to-1. So we were still pretty good with our consensus. And
I'm just not $150 richer.
Right, exactly. Is that what you were doing? Did you have like a little bingo card?
I had a bingo. Oh, dude, the last 2 episodes, I had my bingo card ready.
You need a new pair of shoes? Like, Daddy needs a new pair of shoes.
Christmas is around the corner.
Yeah, so I was very, very happy with the way the show ended. I going back to what you said, David. We're going to be jumping around all over the place. One of the the highlights for me was that, and I guess for the whole season at large, I was not quite certain how, and none of us were quite certain how a season would look being literally cut in half, and yet it became stronger. The series became stronger. It became more focused. Not that the prior 3 seasons weren't focused. It's just they didn't have room to fuck around at all. There was no room for little side stories that didn't immediately come right back to the main myth arc. Everything was just neat and tidy. But one thing I did not expect, because we're dealing with the CW, and I'm not sounding like an elitist, or I'm not trying to sound like an elitist. I think we all know that CW has really fallen off the deep end in terms of quality over the last, I'd say, 10, maybe 12 years. So much so that it wasn't a surprise to any of us when the CW pretty much just went out of business and started canceling all their shows. They were bought out, and their entire business strategy completely changed. And ultimately, that's the reason why, on top of a few other things pertaining to Warner Brothers from the back end in terms of business, the reason why Superman and Lois ended up coming to an unplanned completion.
Yeah.
And we didn't really think, or at least I did not really think we would have this tight of a season while also including our main side characters. I had figured, okay, 10 episodes, we're going to be focusing on our core team. But in all actuality, they managed to use all of these characters so sparingly and in ways that supported the main story and the intent of every episode that I wanted more from these other characters, more than I have had or have wanted in years past.
Oh, yeah.
And then you see how they bring everything together so neatly, and how every single character by the end, even up to sad face Superman's death, you had homeboy loser be the one there to rescue and save him, which I thought was just a great way to give him purpose and also keep him connected to the Superman family. Kyle, of course.
Yes.
And it just worked way better than I had imagined. And I really don't have a whole lot of complaints. Now, that being said, let's jump into what they did specifically with all of these characters. Number one, let's start with Superboys. David, how did you feel ultimately? I know your little brief, in a nutshell, consensus or thoughts. You said you loved it, but break it down more. Tell me, why did it work for you? Did you have any issues with the recasting at the last minute with the older, I hate to say recasting, but for a lack of better words, let's just say the updated older version of Jonathan and Jordan? Did you have any problems with that, or did it all work?
I actually want to be honest and say it worked. It felt real to me because, like, there is a trope that I feel that after watching, like the CW and a lot of like the Flash and Arrow, one of the things I noticed that they're afraid of doing sometimes when they age a character and the actor themselves is rather young, they say, oh, heck with it, we're going to put prosthetics on him or makeup and then age him up.
Yeah.
Here, I appreciate the fact that they went out and got 2 older looking actors that kind of match the physique that you would expect of Jordan and Jonathan. And also make sure that he looks like their dad. That was the thing that amazed me, was the fact they found 2 older actors that looked like Tyler. And that amount of that to me is kind of like better detail than keeping the same actor and then aging them up.
Oh, I
with
agree.
Makeup.
I mean, and they did that with Tyler and oh gosh, what's her name? The chick that plays Lois,
Betsy.
Betsy Tulloch. But that they found not just 2 guys that looked enough like Tyler or looked physically like the next iteration, in terms of size, even their mannerisms, like in those scenes, you felt like these were older versions of Jonathan and Jordan. And then as you get introduced to their families and children, it felt very organic and natural.
And it also felt like even in the very end, toward the end, when both boys or both men are kneeling by their father's grave or father's deathbed, both sons still act like they would if it was actually their younger selves. You know, you have, I think it's Jordan that's actually holding his dad's hand, and Jonathan being the more, I want to say, stoic of the two brothers. He's the more mature of the two brothers. He's the one standing and kind of like overseeing, you know, not showing emotion. He's still emotional. It's his dad that's dying on the bed, but he's the strong point.
He's the rock.
He's the rock to Jordan. And Jordan is the more emotional one that's actually holding his dad. And, you know, like when he breaks down, when his dad passes away, I love the fact that that scene in itself was so powerful because like Clark ends up passing away and the two actors don't stop. They don't stop. They continue actually mourning their father, like he's gone. He passed away.
You're talking about as his spirit
rises up.
Yeah.
And you see like Jordan like break down and Jonathan just basically put his hand on his brother and basically just hold him.
That entire
That's
sequence,
their whole dynamic.
As that camera panned away and his spirit or whatever it was came out of the physical mortal coil, it was very well executed because they keep in that scene.
They keep in the scene, keep in the moment.
And we come with the camera with Clark.
And they, in order for a scene like that to work, we had to really be attached to the characters. Sometimes when you write characters, you tend to be attached, the audience, you tend to be attached to the actor. But the fact that this show has just written these characters so well, it doesn't matter that they exchange the actors because we are connected to the characters themselves.
Yes.
That's how well written these characters have been. And sticking with that line of thought, the way they even brought their story to an end, I felt was way more in line with what I wanted because for me, Superman's special. Yeah. And even though they're his children, there was a part of me that didn't really want them to be as powerful as Superman, just because Superman needs to be unique in my own fan mind. I feel like he needs to be the one and only true Superman. And the way they explain how, yes, they'll never be as strong as Superman, but it's okay because they don't need to be because they have each other.
They have family.
They're two halves
yes.
of a whole. That right there is so representative of what we have spoken about several times of Superman's duality.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that they manifest that figuratively in the two boys, again, a testament to the show. And what Steve has brought up continually this season is the metaphor, the poetics of this season is way stronger than any previous season. They paid attention not just to narrative, but to the poetics of narrative. Visually, that's why you have an ending like they did as well. Very existential, which let's just jump into that as well. Usually when you talk about existentialism, people tend to think, oh, doom and gloom, no meaning in life. But there is a positive side of existentialism.
Yes.
Existentialism in itself is powerful because it helps one to establish meaning in their life.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say a bright side and a downside, it's probably not the most accurate way to characterize existentialism, but typically when you use existential thought in a movie, it's not upbeat, or a TV show. It's not upbeat. The fact that they use the bright side, the optimistic side of existentialism, and that's how they brought Superman's story to an end, the fact that at the end of his life, he discovered the meaning of life at the end. And after he dies, he realizes that the meaning of life is joy. And that in itself is connected to something that I really didn't want them to do. But this is how you do it. If you're going to do it, you do it this way. We have been afraid because of modern trends in writing that they were going to go down the woke route, the social justice route, because the comics have.
Yeah.
They have indicted Superman through a social justice lens, saying that he hasn't done enough. By bringing Mannheim back, connecting that aspect of his story back to Superman not only brings Superman to another level of heroism, it does something that most or no other Superman series has ever done. It showed this idea of Superman not just saving, but what was the word they used? It wasn't about saving anymore. It was about fixing and doing more.
Yeah.
And he picked up charity work. He started saving like actual within neighborhoods. That was kind of the whole idea. You guys need to talk for a second.
Sure. But it also goes into like a lines of, you know, one of the things that we have discussed the past episodes was the fact that Superman, the whole idea, I remember Mike mentioning about like how the series itself had to leave still that premise of hope. Because the symbol of Superman is supposed to be the symbol of hope.
Hope and legacy. Those are the two things. Yeah.
And like, how can you really do that if the whole point is we're going to have Superman die? And and when you think about it, like even in comics, it was hard because like, say for example, me and you, Steve, might be familiar with this. Is like the story is like that everyone points at as the greatest Superman stories is All-Star Superman and Man of Tomorrow. Both of those ended they tried to end upbeat, but it still was depressing. Superman ended up still dying.
See, you're exactly right, David. That's the direction I was going. The fact that they wanted to end this series by giving it a sense of finality, right?
Yeah.
Sense of a true ending. Well, how do you do that with Superman without it feeling overly depressing in a very dark way? Well, this is what they chose to do. Well, okay, we'll end the show. We'll give him a death. But through death, he finds meaning, joy, and suddenly everything makes sense to him in his final moments or his afterlife, however you want to look at it. And we'll talk about that in a minute. I'm sure we all have our own interpretations.
Yeah.
But they wanted to give it the story where it had a definitive conclusion, but that's a trick. That's quite the feat when you're dealing with Superman, and the IP is inherently optimistic and hopeful. How do you do that? Well, this is how you do it.
This is how you do it.
And this is what this show has done so well since the beginning. They managed to do things that typically, if someone were to put it on paper and hand it to me and say, this is what I want to do, I'd be like, no. No, we're not going to kill.
What are you, insane?
We're not going to kill Superman. We're just not.
What are you, crazy?
Because you know that's still what they did. We still got the death of Superman.
Yeah.
But, and I was like, you sons of bitches. When it ended, like, we actually did get the death of Superman. It just wasn't what we thought.
We got 3 of them, actually.
We got 3 of them.
Dude, these people are sadists. Like, serious, or masochists. Who are the ones which ones enjoy it?
Masochists.
Yeah. They're masochists.
They're masochists. That's the thing about, like, this whole season I am so shocked at because, like, my entire life as a comic book fan.
You're right.
As a comic, as a 3 times. And like my entire life as a comic book fan, and especially as a Superman fan, one of the things that always irritated me is there's never been a quote unquote perfect story that encapsulates what Superman really is from beginning to end.
Yeah.
And like, you mean to tell me a TV show after many years, probably 75 plus years of Superman storylines, we finally get the perfect Superman story that embodies what Superman really is, his ideals of hope, legacy, joy. You know,
Family.
everyone makes fun of the fact that he's a goody two-shoes, but when you watch this, you can't tell me that those are really positive qualities that all of us should really strive for.
Yeah, well, his stubbornness is whittled down through Lois's
Interactions, yeah.
That's another thing this show has done well. Like, they stuck true to Superman's sometimes annoying stubbornness. You know, we've talked about that when we've discussed Smallville. Like, we're like, listen, if you weren't so stubborn, Lex never would have turned bad. Lois is that softening variable that which isn't that the whole point of the show?
Yeah.
Superman and Lois, it's you have the hero, but he's not the hero he should be without the Lois element.
She makes him be a better Superman.
Yeah.
And on that
Yeah.
and on that note too, with Lois, this is probably the best representation of Lois because she's not a side piece to Superman. She's not,
No,
she's not
an
a
equal.
sidekick.
She's an equal in so
She
many
is
ways.
just as strong as Superman. She doesn't have superpowers, and she doesn't need them.
But it's not
She's
about
the brain of the operation.
She's the brain of the operations, honestly. She's the heart of the operations because, like, going into, like, what you're talking about, Mike, is, like, if you think about it, Superman, the whole season, even, like, since season one of his problems is he's never able to get over the fact that if he wants a certain thing done and, like, say for instance, his sons don't do it, what does he do? He gets constantly frustrated. But the person that calls him back is Lois.
and she did that. So when the boys went in to save him, after he told them to get the hell out of Dodge and help people, and then they still went in and saved them, and then he freaked out. And he's like, I told them not to come. And she's like, I told them to come.
Yeah.
And it was like that moment of that interaction between Clark and Lois. You can't do this by yourself. You need them.
Yeah. And just not to be jumping around too much, but
It's
like
all right.
that moment when you see the Superboys literally save the day. And they do it differently. Like Jonathan saves people one way that he basically kind of like a bull in a china shop, just basically grabbing people, doing like what you would expect a firefighter or a first responder to do. Meanwhile, you have Jordan literally saving people slowly, trying to be a therapist to people. Hey,
showing empathy and compassion and
empathy and
care.
compassion. And like that moment when he saves the waitress in the diner and makes her calm down because he knows how she's feeling. So here, I'm going to just stay calm, stay with me. And then he takes her out of there. That is probably the most badass moment I've ever seen Jordan do as a Superboy.
Well, just to show that both of them have their own strengths and qualities as individuals and yet still learn those strengths in themselves through both Clark and Lois as parental units.
It makes sense why Lois basically looks at Clark and says, no, I sent them to go help you because I know my boys can do it.
Yeah.
It's very well written.
And the way the series has been constructed dealing with family and the reliance on family is basically what the show has been saying is how you succeed, how you succeed is not the right word, but it's how you rise to the occasion.
Persevere.
How you
Endure.
rise above and endure in life. And that is ultimately, and this is why this show is so fucking poetic, is why Lex failed.
Yes.
Because Lex threw out all family.
And tried to go it alone.
And go at it alone. His daughter first, then even Amanda McCoy.
Yeah.
And that's when everything fell apart for him. So you see, there's even a bit of commentary there. Go at it alone or immerse yourself with supportive, non-toxic individuals in your life. That's really the message. And that's a great message in today's environment because just to use this series to transpose it over society. I mean, we see the divisions in family. We see the divisions in friendships, all because of political, economic, divisive reasons that are happening in society today. So to have a show like this series has been scoffed at by certain social justice warriors, certain individuals who wanted this show to fall into a similar template format as the other CW shows. If you guys remember, we talked about it in detail during the first season. All of the complaints, not enough minorities, not enough, marginalized individuals in the show. But the show continued down its path. And by the end, you realize that this series is speaking to society more than Supergirl, more than Arrow ever did. Not only was it saying more, but it was also far more relatable to way more people than the nichiness of Supergirl and Arrow and the Flash.
Not only was it saying more, it was doing so with elegance and precision.
Yeah.
Whereas the other ones were, I'm gonna bash you over the head with a hammer.
Yeah, that's what I like about it too, especially going back to the final fight with Lex and Superman, the poetic parallels that you have. You have Lex by himself screaming into the storm that's behind him, "Why won't you die?" And like Superman goes on this bit of a short tangent telling Lex as he's ripping out kryptonite and also angry, "You attack my town, you attack my family, you're not taking those away from me anymore." And then like that is what galvanizes him. It's not Superman's hatred towards Lex. It's his want to protect those that he cares about, his family. Meanwhile, you have Lex, just like what you said, Mike. Think of the parallel. He's standing in a storm by himself. He doesn't have Doomsday. He doesn't have Amanda. He doesn't have his daughter. He's just a man on himself screaming into the storm.
With a little hype man in his earplug, right?
Yeah,
when Superman punched that suit clean off of him,
Oh man,
and
that was a cool
it
shot.
basically just disintegrated into a gazillion pieces. Oh my god,
Dude, I wanted his socks to fall off too, just because just his socks just
knocked his socks
it's
off.
slow motion. Dude, I laughed not because it was corny, but because it was like so fucking awesome. Like, dude punched him so hard he fell out of his suit.
Yeah.
Where's the socks? I want to see the socks fly off.
I want him to be butt naked when he comes
Which,
out.
by
of
the
this.
way, that does happen.
Yes.
Which is funny. Like when people get hit by cars, well, that's not funny.
yeah.
When people get
It
hit by
can be.
cars, their socks and
The
shoes go
socks are
flying off.
Flying off.
Yeah.
So not only was the show like just writing great stories that are relatable, but also at the end of all of that, there is a message. There absolutely is a message. And that's one thing that really stuck out for me when Superman started narrating at the end of the final episode. And he said that when he came back to life, obviously, he said he realized that things are not how they should be. We had that little montage of all the riots and the problems in society that he has turned a blind eye to because he's more concerned with the larger problems,
Yes.
the heroic problems that you would expect a hero of his status and power to take care of. So even at the end, there was this positive social commentary on doing your part and taking care of the people who have less than you, the ones who are not as privileged as you. It was a great way to add some credibility to the series because, as I said, the series, when I say credibility, I'm talking about, of course, social credibility, because the series has been criticized by certain people
Oh yeah.
every season that it's not doing enough socially. Well, they just fucking ended the show saying that you could almost argue that was the intent.
It's the perfect social message.
Yes.
It's not, and in all the times that me and you have covered shows, Mike, one of the things that basically ticks us off to no ends is when they decide to stand on a soapbox and do their social commentary, right? Here with Superman, it's written so elegantly. It's not like a hammer hitting you over the head. It's a statement that makes you think throughout the ending. If I want to be like Superman, if I want to be a hero, this is what I should be doing. I should be doing this. I don't have to, reverse time and spin around the world to make things stop.
Yeah.
I can just basically do what I can to make the world a better place.
And it's not social commentary being pulled out of their ass because it harkens back to a character they had in season 3 by introducing Mannheim or reintroducing Mannheim and his story in episode 9. It allows for a perfect way for Superman to do exactly what Mannheim had argued he should do.
And I was going to ask you about that. Would it because a lot of people that I've talked about the show actually asked me about this ending. Would have it been better if it was Lex instead of Mannheim? Because like the pure hatred of that Lex has, that is the thing that basically really galvanized the ending, and to all of a sudden maybe rehabilitate Lex
No,
the end.
I think it works great for Mannheim because of the relationship that Lois had with his wife through the cancer treatment.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
And then also the fact that when Clark had his death experience as a ghost with Lex, and one of the points he makes is part of life, like part of the meaning is forgiveness. As you sit there and see lonely Lex Luthor with no family, no friends, nobody, bawling his eyes out, but then later to juxtapose that against him being in prison, which is one of the most ultimate lonely of lonelies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now he's not top dog. He's not going to be top dog. And Mannheim is now he's going to be Mannheim's bitch. Mannheim is in control in that prison now. And then to have Mannheim back with Lois and Clark, it just creates this beautiful synergy, I think.
Yeah, I agree. It fits better with the themes that they had set up to go with the Mannheim aspect instead of Lex. But that is an interesting question, Dave, because it does beg the question, what do you do with Lex at the end? Do you just end it with him being the ultimate villain? And I would say yes. I think I think that was the point. Once he rejected his daughter, it was done. I knew he was done. Like, this is it. They were. I had a feeling prior to that possibly they could probably work some type of redemptive edge, possibly.
But you know what?
Not that we needed it with Lex, because Lex, he's not really a redemptive type of character.
No,
he's not.
okay.
He's not that type of character. Yes, there are versions that aren't as bad that you can root for. This wasn't one of them.
No, and Mannheim was redemptive in this, and now in Strikers, Mannheim and everybody that's under his tutelage can run a train on Lex.
I'm glad you put it that way. Wow.
All right, free prison sex.
Choo choo.
I'm glad you put it that way, Mike, because it makes more sense. Because like, if it were Lex, then in that way, if like some of my friends who were thinking Lex should have been it, if that were the case and Lex had it, it would have felt more CW-ish because here's another villain that gets a redemptive arc.
Yeah.
You know?
Not everybody's redemption worthy. I mean, facts.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think it's okay to have a character like Lex to be the alt evil. I don't have a problem with that. He was a bad dude. I also didn't expect him to be this dark, so I was appreciative that they gave us this version because we've never seen a Lex Luthor quite like this. None of our Lex Luthors have ever been completely a lost cause.
I'm telling you, Mike, this is by far one of the perfect renditions of characters I've seen in any comic book fashion. I mean, like, this is the best Lex Luthor. Yeah, don't get me wrong, I love Kevin Spacey and Gene Hackman's portrayal. They're classic.
Yeah.
But here there's so much depth done to this
more grounded.
character. It's more grounded, and the way they made this character more relatable. This is something that the comic books have always tried to strive to do, is to kind of make Lex a bad guy, but you understand him.
That's what really worked for this character because, yes, he's not redemptive, but we can understand him. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important. Even if you have a story, a good old-fashioned good versus evil type of story, which is really what this season was about, or I should say, I don't want to say that's what it was about, but that's what they were doing with this villain. Whereas the prior 3 seasons, Superman has not been pushed up against sheer evil. This is the first season that he was actually paired with sheer evil. And that just makes it far more interesting, but also when writers, directors tend to give us evil villains, it's also very hard to relate to them. They're very one-dimensional. Lex was not one-dimensional, and that's why it felt a little conflicting at times.
But
because even though we didn't like his behavior, there was a part of us that was like, we understand you, but enough's enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say to that point, look, I'm going to blow Battlestar again for a second here. The thought that you can relate and understand the motivations, it reminds me a lot of Baltar.
Yeah.
You know, Baltar was inexcusable person almost from scene 1 that he enters frame, where you're like, who is this fucking guy? Like, everything he says is a lie or a half truth. It's so painfully obvious he's full of shit. And
even
just
when he becomes like almost like a religious zealot.
yeah, every step of the way, you're like, how do you idiots keep falling for this nonsense? He's clearly a piece of shit. But without him, you don't get the outcomes that ultimately come to pass. He was necessary. He was required to drive that story. And then at the end of Superman, one thing I appreciated when you guys were talking about that earlier, as an epilogue, and it can seem kind of like an easy go-to to do something like that from a writing perspective.
Yeah.
But it worked in this instance, and it reminded me a lot of that last 5 minutes or so of Battlestar, the epilogue in Battlestar, 4 minutes, whatever it is. And people shit all over that ending. But when you
People
think...
are stupid, Steve.
What's that?
People are stupid.
People are stupid, but when you think about Baltar and Caprica 6 walking through the city and reading about mitochondrial Eve and then the rise of AI and machines, it still leaves you, while there's a sense of, oh shit, what have we done? It's all going to happen again. There's still a sense of hope. And the words they speak in those last few sentences of the season or the series gives you that sense of hope. Well, what if we can break the cycle? That's what it felt like here. You can break the cycle. You can leave a legacy. You have all these little super grandchildren. God knows how many superpowers they're going to be able to have.
God only knows.
Right? So, I don't know. I don't know how they pulled this off, honestly. I watched that last 5 minutes probably 3-4 times. And it's very touching. It's very inspiring.
Yeah, I would agree. And your thoughts on the epilogue, that typically those things don't always work. You're absolutely right. But something that we say a lot on this network, I'm sure Dave will know what I'm about to say. If you know the rules, you can break them. And the same thing applies to things that might come off derivative if other directors or writers do them, or hacky. But if you have a team of writers that just know what they're doing, they can make almost anything work. And that's why such a thing like an epilogue and a prologue, as well as flashbacks. How many times have I said, I hate flashbacks.
Yes.
Fuck off with your flashbacks. If you can't tell a linear story, then you're not a writer. You're relying too much on gimmickry in order to tell your story, because you cannot tell A to B to C linear story.
And think about it,
and
Mike.
yet this series has gone against all of my requests typically when it comes to writing, and yet they have made it work.
Yeah, Mike, think about this too, is like, I'm glad you pointed that out, because I've been holding on to that till the very end.
Yeah.
This series
is everything I hate typically.
It's everything that me and you hate.
In terms of form. In terms of form, it's almost everything I hate.
Because like, one of the shining achievements of this series was actually the retelling of the relationship of how it started, Superman and Lois. And that is one of the most beautiful scenes during the series that me and you gush over. Guess what? It's a flashback.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, like what you said, we always hammer people, don't do a freaking 3 years later.
They did
years.
They did flashbacks. They did when they flash forward at the end and he's going through his little spiritual journey. I mean, how about when he the boys opened the door and Lois is looking like a bombshell in that dress.
Looking like $1 million bucks.
God. That's the scene that I was like going, I wonder if this is when Mike just starts bawling.
I'm like, what's behind the door?
Especially
it's a new car. No.
You start the scene with
a refrigerator.
I was like,
Price is Right.
I was like cracking up when they started that scene with the death of Lois. When they say, oh yeah, the cancer came back. And all of a sudden it's like, what?
You're like, what?
What are you doing?
So,
what are you doing?
So this is a perfect example, guys, of none of us wanted this.
None of us wanted
Lois to die. None of us want Superman to die. But it goes to show you what we want doesn't matter if it's done the right way. Because if they would have told me moving into season 4 that Superman dies at the end, 32 years in the future, fuck off with that shit. No, that is awful.
In fairness, I did want that. I was clear.
Yeah,
on
he
that.
did.
Yeah,
he
I
did want that.
You wanted to see where everything was years into the future, yeah.
And
you
ultimately
also
we got
called
it.
crypto.
You called crypto.
I called crypto. I called the moment of them on the front patio, kind of having their moment with the grandkids.
And dude, the fact that he makes the crypto moment even more emotional, because when Lois dies, he goes and gets crypto.
And
Holy
says,
shit!
"How did I not have a dog my whole life?"
How have I not done
Yeah,
my whole
that
life?
was good. Another thing that's sad, just moving back just a bit, sad but also so on theme. The fact that Doomsday
Oh my god,
is
dude,
underneath
yes.
the mountain for the last however many weeks, just plowing away at the entry to where he believes the entry to his world is.
Mm-hmm.
How sad is that?
And the fact
He just wants to go home,
just
is
wanted
what
to go home.
Lois said. That
ending scene between him and Doomsday, when
yeah.
Doomsday comes to,
When he-
realizes that he's gonna die, but
He knows he knows he needs to.
he knows he needs to, and he doesn't fight Clark. And the last moments of his life is what? Seeing his Lois.
Flashback, a
The
similar
flashback,
thing. Yeah.
seeing his Lois, and then he disintegrates, basically joining his. This is the only way he's going to rejoin his family.
Am I the only one that really likes his version of Lois?
Yeah. Oh, dude. I said that.
Like-
I think I said that during season, what was it 3? Season 2?
Ooh,
Yeah, because Goth Lois. I'm like, yes, please.
Goth Lois is got it going on. Shit, man.
You
But
probably would want to just disintegrate me now.
yeah, just end me.
I would be beating down that mountain entry too.
Well, I don't know what you know. So what? He gets home. He gets himself home. Then what? She's gone.
She's gone.
She's gone.
Yeah,
so,
but
like,
he's obviously not thinking straight. He has
Oh
that.
no, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. That's how driven Doomsday was.
It just shows you that he's still Superman inside.
He's still a Superman inside, and the thing that basically is the only thing that connects him to Superman is his love for Lois,
Yeah.
which is hilarious because at
and
the very
also-
end, that's it.
And also that moment shows the, I guess you can say the normies, that Superman is not whole without Lois. So how do you show that? Well, let's be true to what we're trying to tell in this story, this theme of family and the fact that Lois is a vital piece of Superman's life, his meaning, his purpose. Well, let's do the same thing when we end Doomsday's story to show that his entire purpose and motivation, even through the torturous pain and mutations he's gone through, at his core,
He's still
his meaning and purpose in life is Lois
Yeah.
Lane.
Goth Lois.
Goth Lois.
I
As Mike
get it.
said, he would be breaking down that door too. He would
Yeah.
be like, let me fucking in.
Just the poetry of what you just said right there, on its own.
Yeah.
Mike, of two completely parallel universe instances of our hero and his significant other, and that in relationships, no two halves come together to be a whole, right? You need a whole person and a whole person to come together and work together, to be there for each other. But in this case, that's kind of what you have, right?
Yeah.
It's like
Well, isn't that kind of like, yeah, you're right. That it's more than just, we keep talking about duality, and family, but it's even more than that. What you said about whole, two, what did you say? Two wholes?
Two
Make
wholes.
Two halves
complete?
of the whole.
Okay, well, that's kind of what they've been doing, right? You have Lois and Clark, you have Jordan and Jonathan, you have Lana and John Henry, you have Doomsday and Lois. It's all, they rely and need each other.
And
so
think
in the
about-
writing room, that's probably what their intent is. Well, let's have this abstract idea that in order to be a complete human, to be a complete person, you need to rely on your other half.
Which actually works for what you said earlier about Lex, because Lex
Exactly.
Lex
He's empty.
doesn't he's a broken person at this point, and he's not whole.
he's not whole,
and he had the opportunity.
He had the
to
opportunity.
have a hole.
Yeah, man.
Now Mannheim's going to use him as a whole.
Oh.
He's about to have a hole.
Probably multiple.
Gaping.
If Superman and Lois was on HBO, we would have seen that at the end.
It's like Oz.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
It's the spinoff. Cornholing Lex. Like, that's the... Yeah, it's part of James Gunn's new DCU?
Oh, probably.
Probably.
I mean, it does seem like his type of crude humor, right?
Oh, and dude, now that we've seen the ending, I'm sorry. I feel sorry for Daniel Cornsweet or David Cornsweet for Superman Legacy. Dude's got a mountain to climb.
He
Well,
does.
There's a lot of people saying that it's not fair to compare this series to the upcoming movie, and they said the same thing about Penguin. Like, don't compare Penguin to the Batman.
No, we will.
Because a TV show has more time for character development. I'm like, yeah, that's true, but the character development was done within 2 hours.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we didn't get more, but I'm saying what you needed to be involved in the character. So you fuck off with your non-excuses.
Yeah, that's a non-excuse.
And the reason why I'm saying that, David, is because I agree with you. It doesn't matter that James Gunn's movie is a 2-hour film. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
There is a lot that you need to do now. After you cannot, the Superman fans will not be happy if you don't at least attempt to match what they did with this series on a human level.
I don't know if you can. I felt like there was moments, obviously in the Reeves Superman, even in the Brandon Routh Superman.
We've seen movies, though. Forget Superman movies,
tried.
Steve. We've seen movies that have done it in 2 hours where you're like, wow, that was a complete meal. Like, you felt like you knew those characters through and through.
Like Debbie Does Dallas.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
No, I just, some of it's about the timing of like doing some of these things.
Yeah.
Some of it's like, man, just chill. Like, you should have given yourself a few more years, some breathing room before you jump
That's what I mean,
right into
Steve.
Superman. Because look, like I loved Henry Cavill. I loved him. But you
flushed him down the toilet.
I didn't. I still love him.
I'm saying they did.
They did. And so you now have what I would argue is the perfect Superman story on film or television.
Yeah.
Let it sit and simmer for a minute.
Yeah.
Like, there's no need to put something new in the oven.
And that's why I'm like going, I'm hoping, I have hope, because I'm a Superman fan, I have hope that the movie will be okay. All points say
I'm
that
sure
it'll be
okay.
fine. It'll be fine. But
I don't think it's going to suck.
The problem is, just like what you said, though, Mike, to those people that basically say you can't compare Superman, screw off. We've been doing that since the beginning of Superman. We compare Superman.
Yeah.
And that's why, I agree with a lot of people saying that, oh my God, Tyler's the best Superman that we've ever had. And people get upset, say, well, no, my Superman's Henry Cavill. And I'm like going, okay, that's cool. That's your Superman. But guess what? If you're not watching the show,
And that's the problem, is how many people have slept on this show in general, let alone many of the other CW shows, because they're only interested in film, something that they can get in 2 hours or whatever. I get it.
Let me show you how many people have slept on this.
Oh.
The average viewership this season is so far lower than any season because the CW has nothing left
Yeah, they
on
don't
the
have-
show.
And they've not promoted it hardly at all.
No. So the season finale was only watched by 500,000 people.
that's insanity. It's insane.
Can you imagine writing this series and you're like, I wrote my ass off. This
Yeah.
is some of the best written television of the last 5 years, and arguably one of the best Superman stories, if not the best Superman story
Ever.
in live action, period.
And I'm sorry.
And it was watched by 500,000 people on average. One episode was 300,000.
I mean, it's so bad, Mike. Honestly, it's...
And yes,
And I've seen sentiment in the fan base starting to turn this way. Is like there's people that saying that have watched the show and loved it and get so frustrated at the fans that basically say that there's no good Superman stuff. And everyone's like, and we're all standing here going, you are watching the show, right?
I've told so many people to watch this show since day one. Here's what my prediction is: when Guns movie comes out, it's clearly going to have a bunch of media hype behind it and promotional and marketing, right? People will go to the theaters and see it. It may not be as successful, air quotes, as maybe Man of Steel. Who knows? I think what's going to happen is people are going to get that new flame up their ass, and then they're going to go over to Max, where they will pull this 4th season of Superman Lois onto Max, and then you'll have a new rise of viewership. But it's too late if you wanted to keep the momentum going for the CW or for more of this. But at least hopefully the 500,000 people for these writers will grow.
We'll grow out of it and basically
Hopefully,
go on to a bigger and better things.
Historically, the Superman and Lois series has done well after those initial same day live plus same day numbers that I'm reading from. For example, we know first season was on fire. It did well on the CW, and then they re-syndicated through all their various other channels that they own, Warner Brothers. So TNT had it. HBO has it currently, the first 3 seasons. In fact, a lot of people were exposed to the series when it moved over to HBO. In fact, everyone I speak to about this series don't even realize it's on the CW. Like, oh, I'm watching it on the HBO app, and I'm like, yeah, okay, cool, just watch it then. So I'm sure season 4 will probably see a huge spike once it goes over to HBO, which I think it will go over there by next week.
Yes.
already.
I believe that's how they do it, because that's what they did with Netflix, but they no longer have that specific deal with Netflix. They would give it a 1 to 2 weeks, and after the finale, and then it goes right over to Netflix, and you get those large Netflix numbers post-season. But now CW does not have those arrangements because Warner Brothers has pulled all of their content, which is fine, because to see the Superman and Lois poster on HBO is so much more cooler than going to the shitty CW app that restarts your show every time you pause it for more than 30 fucking seconds.
Oh my God, dude, that irritates the shit out of me.
I will say that I'm glad this is the last fucking show that we're watching on the CW. This is the end for us, right? Like there is nothing else on the CW.
Well, everyone
I can
basically
delete the app off my TV.
I've read so
Finally,
many
after 15 years.
I've read so many articles, Mike, about how people are saying this is such a great ending, a bookend to the CW. I'm like going, as much as I hate the fact that it's connected to CW.
Yeah.
Because like much like the show has fought hard to stay away from the Arrowverse.
I know.
But so many people say this is the greatest series ending for the Arrowverse.
Yes.
I read that so many times too.
And I'm like going,
don't you get annoyed?
oh, absolutely.
Because, David, I'm glad you brought that up, because there was Supergirl, the Facebook page,
Are you kidding me? No.
posted the finale saying, this is the end of an era. I'm like, bitch, the end of the
You
era.
killed it.
The end of the era was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And if you want to talk about in terms of quality, 10 years ago, after the 4th season of Arrow.
Oh, you're being generous.
You're being generous.
I am, I admit. But with Superman and Lois, they have ran from the Arrowverse since day one.
Meanwhile, the Arrowverse is trying to follow them like a bunch of hungry zombies.
They don't listen. The Arrowverse fans don't listen to the showrunner saying this is not the Arrowverse. The Superman and Lois that you saw in Supergirl, that's not our Superman and Lois. It's not even. You can argue that it's another universe, but we're not even going by those rules. That doesn't exist.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I read an article about. Actually, it was more or less like a fan blog about how the writer was so upset that Supergirl didn't show up in the end, because when Clark is talking about family, Kara should be part of the family.
She doesn't exist.
She doesn't exist.
The Arrow. This is not an Arrowverse show. Just because Fonzie showed up on, whatever bullshit show, whatever it was. Remember when Fonzie was on every show back in the was it the 70s?
I remember.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that those worlds exist in.
You mean Scoob's not part
Thank
of...
you. That's what I was trying. That's what I was trying to bring up. Yeah, I knew you would know, Steve.
Scooby-Doo, he's not part of Happy Days?
This is where being old together comes in handy.
Zoinks.
Zoinks.
Yeah, so yeah, this has never been an Arrowverse show. From the very first week, I believe they were playing coy for the first, it wasn't just the first week. I think they played coy for a couple months. And then once they realized the show is strong on its own, they said what we already knew. That this is not an Arrowverse show. That this is not the Superman and Lois that was in the crossover. Not only was it not them, meaning alternate reality, That doesn't exist. Pretend that doesn't exist because that never happened. This is its own thing.
One Earth, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's the one I just remembered from my notes. That is one scene I wanted to ask you about, Mike.
Yeah.
You, since the beginning, have been rallying for the famous Superman scene where we see Superman fly by,
Yeah.
give a wink and a nod. Technically, they did it with when he says that when he's talking about family, you see him flying with his two sons,
Yeah.
and Steel, and then her daughter or his daughter comes in flying.
But it wasn't what I think Mike had
Yeah.
in his mind's eye of the flying up, turning to the camera, or the camera panning as he
Panning.
turns.
Come on, Mike. This is still CW. We're on a budget.
I could shoot that right now for $5.
Yeah. Which, in fairness, I was really, there was only a couple scenes where it was like, okay, it's like 95% there in terms of the visual effects. But I was okay with it because seeing Doomsday in all of his glory.
He looked great.
God damn, that was awesome.
See, that's what they've been saving up for. Remember, we were saying not a lot of action throughout the season, but it still works because the story is strong. That's the reason why. They wanted to give us that perfect VFX, or I should say CGI asset that looked amazing.
Yes.
Now, can we say that that's the best Doomsday we've ever seen?
Oh, absolutely.
1,000%.
100%.
And the only thing that I would have changed if it were me, but it kind of might have lost a little bit of the thread or the through line through all the seasons, is by the time he embodies what we believe Doomsday to look like, I would have almost argued that the reverse S should have at that point been almost non-existent on his
faded.
chest, like
Yeah.
very subdued to the point where it's almost not even visible.
I agree with you as a fan, but
But do you
also as
think that would-
story-wise, that might have you need that.
You need that through line.
You need
so-
that through line
yeah.
too that still says, no, wait, he's still Bizarro down in there. So
You mean
It's-
Superman?
or
Yeah,
Superman.
Bizarro Superman. Yeah,
Bizarro
yeah.
Superman.
I mean, it still worked for
Yeah,
me. It's just,
Yeah,
little thing.
I get what both are saying, and I think on this one I agree with David. Definitely, I think the whole idea is that he's still Superman inside, so you gotta kind of have that. I guess you can, the crest, the Superman
the
crest, or-
Superman
yeah.
crest.
yeah. So it does work. Anything else that we skipped? We skipped a lot, but in terms of the main aspects of these last two episodes, the emotion, the finale, the redemption, the family, the legacy, we've covered pretty much all of the main aspects.
I mean,
I'm trying, before we close out, is there anything else? I think we've pretty much hit it.
I just want to point out that basically this series, by far, for anyone who wants to see comic book accurate series, you have to watch this because,
Just give me your score too, Dave.
quite honestly, my score for this, I'm gonna give it 100. I just honestly, Mike, I know that you don't like it when I give 100, but in all honesty, this is the series that basically we as Superman fans have been rallying for. They gave us a Doomsday story when no one said that you can do it. They gave us a Lex Luthor story when people basically said, "Oh, it's going to be boring because it's probably predictable." Most unpredictable story that we've had throughout the entire season. The effects, everyone since the beginning of season 1 was actually questioning, oh, it's CW. The effects are going to be terrible. And yet, by the end of this, they gave us every comic book accurate representation of characters visually, down from Doomsday. We didn't even go into costuming of the side characters.
okay,
like
but
at least-
Steel.
But it goes to show you that we give certain things a pass if there's high quality writing.
Yeah.
Because look at the Book of Boba Fett, for example.
Do we
David.
have to?
I don't wanna.
Well, because the visual effects on there are probably considered better than what we have been
Really?
given in Superman and Lois. Well, that's my point. They are. They're considered better. They're big budget, millions of dollars worth of effects. But they're kind of crappy still, and we nitpicked them at times when we were covering that show because the show itself just wasn't that good.
Look.
The writing was so poor. But a series like this that has a far smaller budget And because of that, the visual effects are obviously not going to be nearly as good as something that Lucasfilm can do. And yet, how many times over the course of 4 seasons have we sat and complained about the visuals? I don't think we ever have.
No.
I mean, minor critique, but
Yeah,
look
critique, but complaints, no.
No, but at the end of the day, I never had somebody as iconic as Boba Fett in the way of Superman turn and say, like a bantha. Like, what?
Oh, Steve, why did you have to re-traumatize
Why did you remind
me?
me of that part?
Because it's seared into my brain. I have to live with this,
Like
and
a
so do
bantha.
you.
So do you, like you want me to.
Yes.
All right, so David, 100% for episode 10, but
100.
what about episode 9?
Episode 9, I still, for a penultimate episode, Mike, it's 100 because, like, honestly, in all the times that me and you have covered shows, there's certain criteria that a penultimate episode has to fit.
Yeah.
And throughout the entire episode, I'm like, okay, I don't feel like I'm being left out on anything. I feel like, yeah, penultimate episode, I need to watch the next episode right away. I want to actually see what the hell happens. Especially when you actually, the way they handled the penultimate episode of wrapping people's side stories pretty much up pretty nicely in a little bow.
And also, not only was it, you're right, David, not only was it a great penultimate episode, but the way it ended as well, with Doomsday just grabbing Clark by the
God.
Man, when that ended, what's the word? My heart
Helpless?
like fluttered.
Yeah.
Like, because it was shocking. I didn't expect that.
Oh, dude, when he looks at his family and says, essentially he looks at them and tells them that he loves them. And then boom, Doomsday happens. I'm going,
I didn't watch that live, and I'm glad I didn't. I watched it with the finale, because if I had to wait a week, I'm like, what?
Oh, it
That was
brutal.
intense, man.
It was brutal waiting that week.
Oh, because you actually watched it, right?
I
like the
watched
day of.
it
Yeah.
the day of. I had to, and then sat there all week, pissed off that I had a week.
All right, so I'm gonna make this easy. Episode 9's a 98%.
Okay.
Episode 10 is a 100%. I don't like giving things a 100% all the time. I feel like we're just throwing
Like, come
these
on.
numbers here, but that's how good this series is, and that's how good this finale is. And I'm gonna say something that I don't often say about finales. Finales are hard. They're hard to do right.
yeah.
And yet, this show gave us a finale that I didn't want. The content that was in this finale, I didn't want it.
Yeah, I know. All the things that basically I've always heard you say, I don't want this to happen. I think this is going to be a bad idea. I don't think this is going to work. They were all part of the finale.
Yes, it's because they're such a good writing team, and they sold me on all the ideas that I didn't think I wanted. And if you can, I mean, imagine the emotion. Not imagine. Remember the emotion we felt while watching these episodes. That is hard to do. That is not easy to evoke those type of emotions. It's not easy. So I would feel unfair if I didn't give this show 100%, or I should say the finale 100%. All right, Steve, what about you?
So I won't go as high on 9. For me, it was only a 93. But
This is 93.
But I agree with both of you without a doubt. And I was going to text Mike this, but since he hadn't watched either of them, I didn't want to soil him any
Oh,
further.
dude, I texted him and I don't hear anything from him. So I'm going, I wonder if he did watch
Yeah,
it.
I don't. I was going to text Mike. It's 100. You know, it's 100, and it is that. I don't know how you land that if you're not Simone Biles. and they landed it, and then on top of landing it, kind of did their touchdown dance in those last 5
They
minutes.
spiked the ball.
And you know what, Steve? They said prior to the finale, Helbing, the showrunner, said that this will be the first Superman live action, whether it be television or movie, that has true finale to it. There is an actual ending. There's no cliffhanger
Yeah, and he lived up to
or
it.
a question mark, what could happen. He says, we want to bring finale to this in a way that no other Superman series or movie has ever had. And they did it.
And that's what we talked about, last time we were in the studio. That's why I was saying what I wanted was just the ultimate finale. Now, I wanted a different style of death. I think this was certainly, to Mike's point, repeatedly more hopeful in nature than what my grandiose vision would have been. But the point being that there's a finality to it, that there's no coming back from this.
Yeah.
And it leaves you with something, whether it's something positive or a little sour or whatever, but it leaves you with something that sticks with you for a while.
Yes.
And that's what I wanted. And I got it.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if you guys saw this. Helbing released a few things that I sometimes I wish they don't do this, but apparently Darkseid
Yes. I
was
saw
supposed to
that.
be a part of season 5.
Yeah, which makes sense when you think about it, because there comes a point when throughout the series they were trying to tackle a lot of the Superman mythos. They tackled in the very first season Zod in a very creative way, not bringing him actually in.
Yeah.
And then they had to bring in Bizarro. They tried to bring in Brainiac, but in a different way, in a way that I never really expected. And then Doomsday and Lex. The only villain I can actually think of that they could tackle after this is Darkseid.
Yeah.
But I'm glad we didn't get it.
I am too.
I'm almost glad, and this might sound shitty to some, but I'm almost glad that the CW failed the way that it did, because it allowed us to have this.
I agree.
And that it was forced into this shortened season. This is something special. I think years down the road, people will reflect back on this, especially those that slept on it, and they're going to be like, "How did I miss this? How did this happen?"
And plus, it's also with the character of Darkseid. I think it would have been too much. Do you think, Mike, if they actually tried to bring in a god tier character? Because the series is so grounded in not going too fantastical.
I don't know.
With the characters.
I might be the outlier. Darkseid does nothing for me. He never has.
I'm not a big Darkseid guy just because I feel like both in comics and movies they don't go the distance at times. Like meaning it's a whole other topic, but like they need to delve into the cosmology of Darkseid's world.
Yeah.
Make it a real thing to viewers, and I think it'd be more interesting. All right. So anyways, I agree with a lot of what Steve just said, that in a lot of ways the CW being forced to cancel this show gave us, retrospectively, the best Superman series. I feel like having to end it gave us something that we might not have had. I don't know if they would have ended a series like this the way they did if they had numerous additional seasons.
I don't think they could have, because there's something about pressure and heat
Yeah.
over time produces diamonds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what we got. We got a diamond in the rough that would have never happened had all these external factors not taken place the way that they did.
And I also agree with what you said, Steve, about years down the road. I absolutely agree that in 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, people are going to find this show because it's now on HBO's catalog. They're going to watch it, and they're going to be like, how the fuck did I not watch this series before?
Or they're going to go, wait, this was a thing that happened?
Yeah.
When was this aired? You know what I mean? Like,
It's going to happen.
it's going to happen.
We take for granted that we're tapped in, like we're wired into the internet
Way
and the
wired.
geek world, so we are aware of everything that's going on. Most people, even when they're fans of something, they don't know everything about the show. In fact, if you go to Twitter right now, I guarantee you, if you look up the hashtag, there are people who are asking about season 5. I saw it.
Are you serious?
They didn't even know this was the end. So a
And
lot
that's
of
kinda
people
sad,
just
ain't it,
aren't
Steve?
wired in. So yeah, I think this show is going to be the show that keeps giving, and it's going to be the show for all time. I called this show the little show that could a couple years ago. That's what it's going to be for all time. It's going to keep giving, guaranteed. People still love Smallville. people are still discovering Smallville, and that show is fun and all, but it is not on
Not like this.
the level of Superman and Lois, not even a little bit.
No.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
And
No, it's not.
and I'm going to assassinate Lois's husband in real life. Well, who's her husband? The actor.
Oh, Betsy Tulloch?
Yeah, I'm gonna do what that gentleman did to the insurance CEO. Just clip him in the back and be like, "I'm here for you, girl."
Goth Lois. I dare you show up on her doorstep,
There's a
Goth Lois.
Goth
She'll be like,
Lois.
get off my porch.
Well, if you want Goth Lois, just attend the funeral for her husband. And
Ooh.
I'm going to cut that. All right. Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure doing this show.
For a change.
Also, if we want to keep the Superman show alive from time to time, we can jump in here and do like a discussion maybe 3 times a year on something Superman-eccentric.
No,
so we can
absolutely.
keep this feed alive, because I know we've garnered quite a bit of fans. So if you are listening just on our Superman and Lois feed, be sure you subscribe to our DC on CW feed, or DC on RMD feed. And that way you'll have access to all of our future DC content that we do. And we do those shows pretty often. All right. Thank you, Steve. And thank you, David.
Thank you.